Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, even more particularly to all our fellow Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado and Georgia, in Kansas, in Missouri, in Texas, in Chicago, Illinois, in Arkansas, in California, in New York, in Pennsylvania, Canada, Fiji Island, Mexico, Spain, Africa, Kenya, Zambia, Pakistan, to the United Kingdom, to our brethren in Australia, and also to our brethren in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Papua New Guinea. And to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad, greetings. May the good Lord bless you, my dear brothers and sisters. And this is our special episode number 35, just an hour exposition of the prophecy as the last final warning message just prior to the close of provision. And at this time, I would like to emphasize the great importance of the restoration of the Bible calendar or Bible creation calendar. First of all, the Shepherd's Rod plainly declared that the perfect fulfillment in 2SR 275 says the perfect fulfillment of the prophetic period of Abraham in its antitype is yet in the future, going out of Egypt. So, the antitypical fulfillment of that prophetic period that was given by God to Abraham was still future in the days of Bidihotep, according to the Shepherd's Rod. And the Shepherd's Rod admonishes us to prepare for that event. It says here in 1SR page 64, this experience of the Israelites in departing from Egypt was written for the instruction of those who should live in the last days. Before the overflowing scourge shall come upon the dwellers of the earth, the Lord calls upon all who are Israelites indeed to prepare for that event. So, the voice of inspiration is plainly telling us that, or giving us admonition, that we need to prepare for that event. What event? The departure from Egypt. Going out of Egypt, which is still future in the days of Bidihotep. And since that event is typological, according to 1SR Packet Edition, on page 53, saying, having now seen that Israel's going into Egypt is typological, logic rules that so also must be Israel going out of Egypt. But we focus our attention to the antitypical spiritual Israel going out of Egypt. Let's read again the statement in 1SR on page 101. It says, in the Exodus movement, all the tribes went out of Egypt. If this is a photograph of Israel by the promise, then all the 12 tribes must come out now as well. 12 tribes must escape the ruin of Ezekiel 9, death of the firstborn, and Isaiah 63, the Red Sea. The number of them is said to be 12,000 from each tribe, making a total of 144,000. So it is pointing to the 144,000 living saints, spiritual Israel, by which it was predicted beforehand that all of them will depart from Egypt. And hoping that we will be among that number that will depart from Egypt. Here in 2SR 170, it says, 2SR page 170, the 144,000 are called Israel because their experience is a duplication of that of ancient Israel, going out of Egypt to possess the promised land. 2SR 170. So the 144,000 are called Israel because their experience is a duplication of that ancient Israel going out of Egypt to possess the promised land. So, to all the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad, this message is especially dedicated to all the saints that will no longer to taste death. God is calling you and I to prepare for that predicted event, the departure from Egypt. And B.D. Hotep plainly declared that that event was still future in his days. Both Ellen G. White and B.D. Hotep, they were living in a period of time by which God's people are in Egypt. They were in Egypt, typifying ancient Israel when they were in Egypt. So here in 1SR, let me read to you. Page 115 and 116, it says, 1SR 115 and 116, the experiences of the children of Israel in Egypt was a photograph of our denomination. Thus, their experience is being reproduced in every particular with these people. You see, their experience is being reproduced in every particular. And that experience going into Egypt was fulfilled in the days of Sister White. And even to the time in the days of B.T. Hotep, they were living in a period of time by which they were in the land of Goshen. Here in 1SR page 76, 1SR page 76, the land of Goshen. The beginning of this denomination was typified by Israel's entrance into Egypt as previously explained. It says, we shall now consider the truth of the land of Goshen. Joseph brought Israel into Egypt and gave them the part of the land to dwell in, which was the best land in the country of Egypt. And there Joseph nourished them, their flocks, herds, and cattle, and all they had. See Genesis 45 verse 10. The land of Goshen stands as a symbol of the United States of America, in which the church came into existence. While our country is productive like the land of Goshen, the richest in the world, in a Protestant nation, it is the best for missionary work, for it is made up of all nations. And therefore, like the land of Goshen, the most productive in Egypt, the world. 1SR page 76. So here the Shepherd's Rod made it so plain that the land of Goshen represents the United States of America. But God's people anciently, they did not live in Goshen forever, just temporarily, because that is not their land. They were just strangers. And according to answerer number 2 on page 6, answerer number 2, pages 6 and 7, it says, not purposing, however, to leave them there forever, the Lord did not let their living continue as pleasant as at the first, lest they refuse to take heed to Moses when he should come with the word that the time had arrived for them to go back home. The time had arrived for them to go back home. And that event is typological. Now let me read to you 2TG number 41, page 3 and page 4. 2TG number 41, pages 3 and page 4. Current events, the Palestine situation, and how close the separation. So 2TG number 41, page 3. It says, I have been asked to give a study on current events, on the Palestine situation, and on the separation caused by the slaughter that is forecast in Ezekiel's vision. First of all, brothers and sisters, let us be God's real people, logical thinkers, and not bait hunters. 2TG 24, page 23. The current events in the days of B.T. Hotep could no longer be the current events in our days. Of course, that is the reality. Those events in the days of B.T. Hotep is not the present occurrences today. Now, so the most important part in this reading is that whatever the current events, it is pointing to the Palestine situation. What is the situation of the Palestine today? When we'll be studying Palestine, of course, there are two. The ancient Palestine, which is literally in the Middle East, and the modern Palestine, which is the United States of America. Both nations are prophetic. And In 1SR, let us read again. 1SR page 157 and 158. It is taken from Exodus chapter 15, from verse 14, 15, and 16. So hoping that you will read that verses in Exodus 15, verse 14, 15, and 16. So let us read. It says, quoting Exodus 15, verse 14, 15, and 16. The people shall hear and be afraid. Sorrow shall take hold of the inhabitants of Palestine. Then dukes of Edom shall be amazed. The mighty men of Moab, trembling, shall take hold upon them. All the inhabitants of Canaan shall melt away. Fear and dread shall fall upon them by the greatness of thine arm. They shall be as still as a stone, till thy people pass over, O Lord, till the people pass over, which thou hast purchased. The land of Canaan represents the land into which the church at this present time came into existence, namely the United States of America. The name Palestina means land of strangers. The United States is composed of strangers, people from many nations and races. Dukes of Edom refers to the same class as those mentioned in Isaiah 63 verse 1 as previously explained. The name Moab means progeny or forefathers. Now, the shepherd's rod made it so plain here in 1SR 157 and 158 that the name Palestina is pointing to the United States of America. So, Palestine, United States of America is modern Palestine. So, both Palestine, the modern and the ancient Palestine, is one of there are predicted events concerning the modern Palestine and ancient Palestine, which is closely connected, brothers and sisters, to the current events. As a matter of fact, this reading material in 2TG 41, page 3, if you will go to page 4, connect the presidential election of the United States of America. Let's read page 4, 2TG 41, page 4. It says, the most exciting current event that we know of is the presidential election, which stands only 2 days in the future. As the nation sees it, this is now the biggest thing in the world, even though many will not get what they want, or each one of the different parties has named its own nominee on the presidential ballot, but only one president is to be elected. So here, this reading material, 2TG number 41, saying current events, the Palestine situation, and how close the separation connect both Palestine, ancient, as well as the modern Palestine. Because the shepherd's rod says, one of the most exciting current events is the presidential election of the United States of America. And of all the history in the United States of America, the most controversial election occurred in the days of Donald Trump in 2016, as well as in 2020. Now, I would like to focus first to Daniel chapter 11. We know that Daniel chapter 11, there are 45 verses. And that historical event that occurred on September 11, I think that was on 2001, when the Twin Towers had been destroyed. Now, I would like to read Testimonies for the Church, volume 9, page 12. It says here, on one occasion, when in New York City, I was in the night season, called upon to behold buildings rising story after story toward heaven. And I think all of us knew that this is pointing to the Twin Towers in New York. These buildings were warranted to be fireproof, and they were erected to glorify their owners and builders. Higher and still higher, these buildings rose, and in them the most costly material was used. Those to whom these buildings belong were not asking themselves, how can we best glorify God? The Lord was not in their thoughts. Now, on page 13, it says, the scene that next passed before me was an alarm of fire. Men looked at the lofty and supposedly fireproof buildings and said, they are perfectly safe, but these buildings were consumed as if made of pitch. The fire engines could do nothing to stay the destruction. The firemen were unable to operate the engines. Now, I will go to page 14. It says, "But who reads the warnings given by the fast fulfilling signs of the times? What impression is made upon worldlings? What change is seen in their attitude? No more than was seen in the attitude of the inhabitants of the Noachian world, absorbed in worldly business and pleasure. The antediluvians knew not until the flood came and took them all away." Matthew 24, verse 39. They had heaven-sent warnings, but they refused to listen. And today, the world, utterly regardless of the warning voice of God, is hurrying on to eternal ruin. Then it says, "The world is stirred with the spirit of war. The prophecy of the 11th chapter of Daniel has nearly reached its complete fulfillment. Soon the scenes of trouble spoken of in the prophecies will take place." So, the prophet connect Daniel chapter 11. It says that the prophecy of Daniel chapter 11 has nearly reached its complete fulfillment. Now, let's read this reading in 2TG. 2TG number 42 on page 27. 2TG number 42, page 27. It says, "And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him." 2TG number 42, page 27. The only portion of Daniel 11 yet to be fulfilled is this verse, verse 45, the last of the chapter. And since these prophecies are made to be understood only when they are being fulfilled or after fulfillment, verse 45 is not as clear as we should like to have it. Consequently, concerning the place of his tabernacles and his end, also as to whether another Christian power shall inherit the title King of the North, before verse 45 is fulfilled, only time itself will positively portray the whole truth. It was written by B.D. Hotep on 1948, November 27, 1948. Remember, the prophet says that concerning Daniel 11, verse 45, it is not yet as clear in his days. Or, in other words, Daniel 11, verse 45, in the days of B.D. Hotep, it was not yet completely revealed. It was not yet completely understood. Now, let us establish first the grammatical rule in the biblical scriptures. If the Bible is inscribed that prophetic event in present tense, then the revelation must be at the time when such prophecy is being fulfilled. For example, Revelation 14:7, the judgment is come. It is inscribed in present tense. And according to the Shepherd's Rod, in 1SR, page 156, it says, "We as a people hold that the verb come was inscribed in present tense because the judgment in heaven took place at the end of the 2,300 days of Daniel's prophecy in 1844. But it was not understood until after the prophetic period had passed. Therefore, God did not intend to make the judgment known until after the hour had come. For this reason, inspiration inscribed, the occurrence in present tense is come, in order to be grammatically correct." So that is how God revealed His own words. If it was inscribed in present tense, indicates that God has no intention to reveal the truth prior to the event. Otherwise, the revelation would be grammatically incorrect. Now, concerning Daniel 11, verse 45, it says, let's read. Daniel 11, verse 45, "And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him." So, Daniel 11, verse 45 is inscribed in future tense, "And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him." Plainly indicating that the revelation of Daniel 11, verse 45, it must be completely understood prior to the event, being inscribed in future tense. That is why the Shepherd's Rod says in 1SR 244, it says, "It is wonderful to note the inspiration of the scriptures. Perfect they are when their appointed time is come. Only at such an occasion are the scriptures grammatically correct." Why is it that God did not completely reveal in the days of B.T. Hotep concerning Daniel 11, verse 45? First of all, the only answer that can be given is it was not present truth in their time. It says in page 13 in 1SR, the answer we give is because it was not present truth in their time. Why? Because God knoweth beforehand that Betihotep, together with his associates, they will die and never experience the fulfillment of Daniel 11 verse 45. Therefore, Daniel 11 verse 45 must be revealed to the people who will experience that event. And before that event will arrive, God would give them the gift of understanding to completely understand Daniel 11 verse 45. Now, I would like to read 2SR 151. 2SR page 151. It says, the two-horned beast is the only one representing a local religio-political government. If you will say religio-political government, that is the time when church and state had been fused together. Now, here in 2SR 113, I would like to read first to emphasize what does it mean by religio-political government. Now, here in 2SR 113, it says, it has been previously explained. 2SR 113. It has been previously explained that when the crowns appear on the heads, it denotes a religio-political system. So what symbolization in the book of Revelation that it is representing by a religio-political government? When the crowns appear on the heads. When the crowns appear on the heads. Now, brothers and sisters, I think it is only found on the symbolization of the red dragon that the crowns appear on the heads. And that is the only symbolization to signify a religio-political system. So, that predicted event, brothers and sisters, the United States of America, we know that the two-horned beast pointing to the United States of America. And it was predicted beforehand, brothers and sisters, that there must be a religio-political government in the United States of America. From 1776, from the time when America obtained independence, I think from that time onwards, there was no religio-political government in the United States of America. But it was predicted beforehand that there must be religio-political government in the United States of America. But such system symbolized only to the symbolization of the red dragon. And that's why Sister White says on the Great Controversy, I would like to read to you. The Great Controversy, page 438. It says, the Great Controversy, page 438. In contrast to those who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus, the third angel points to another class, against whose errors a solemn and fearful warning is uttered. If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. Revelation 14, verse 9 and 10. A correct interpretation of the symbols employed is necessary to an understanding of this message. What is represented by the beast, the image, the mark. The line of prophecy in which these symbols are found begins with Revelation 12. Now, this prophecy made it so plain that the line of prophecy in which these symbols are found begins with Revelation chapter 12. So, concerning the message of the third angel, it commences on Revelation chapter 12. Of course, on Revelation chapter 12, there are only two main subjects. It is pertaining to the woman which is clothed with the sun and the red dragon. It says here in 2SR on page 76, it says, John's vision in the 12th chapter of Revelation deals with two main subjects, namely the woman clothed with the sun and the red dragon. 2SR page 76. So concerning Revelation chapter 12, there are only two main subjects. First, pertaining to the woman which is clothed with the sun and the red dragon. Or in other words, if we study Revelation chapter 12, there are only two things. There will be no neutral position. Either will be a part of that woman or either will be a part of that red dragon. But the reason that we quoted Revelation chapter 12, because only on the symbolization of the red dragon that portray a religio-political government. Now, I would like to read again. 2SR page 113. It says, it has been previously explained that when the crowns appear on the heads, it denotes a religio political system. So, what symbolization by which a religio political system does symbolize? It is symbolized, brothers and sisters, when the crown appear on the heads. And that symbolization, brothers and sisters, that the crowns appear on the heads is found only on the symbolization of the red dragon. Now, brothers and sisters, if the spirit prophecy plainly told us that concerning the message of the third angel, the line of that prophecy begins on Revelation chapter 12, according to the Great Controversy 438. Now, for example, here on 1SR Packet Edition, 1SR Packet Edition on page, page 45. 1SR Packet Edition, page 45, it says, by parallel logic, this new Pharaoh, who knew not Joseph, and who sought to destroy the Lord's people, the Israelites, typifies a master enemy, none other than Satan. So, who is he? The antitypical Pharaoh who know not Joseph? Satan. A false god, the usurper of this world, who knows not Christ, and who seek to enslave his people, the Christians, while they are sojourning in antitypical Egypt. So, the prime mover, brothers and sisters, of this predicted event, who will say that, I will not let Israel go. In Exodus chapter 5, it says, reading verse 1 and verse 2, and afterward Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, thus said the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. Verse 2, and Pharaoh said, who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go. And that event is typological, pointing to the antitypical fulfillment when God is now calling his people, 144,000 living saints, to depart from Egypt. And who is the antitypical Pharaoh? According to 1SR Packet Edition, page 45, Satan. But we know that, of course, Satan will not do it by himself. Anybody, brothers and sisters, that will withhold God's people in Egyptian bondage, of course, they are represented by the instruments of Satan. Now, here, brothers and sisters, when we read 1SR, if you still remember, 1SR, on page 101, let us read again the statement. In the Exodus movement, all the tribes went out of Egypt. If this is a photograph of Israel by the promise, then all the 12 tribes must come out now as well. 12 tribes must escape the ruin of Ezekiel 9, death of the firstborn, and Isaiah 63, the Red Sea. Isaiah 63, it says, the Red Sea. On page 99, on 1SR, it says, the Red Sea. The Red Sea symbolizes Isaiah 63. So that is very plain, right? It says, the Red Sea symbolizes Isaiah 63. Edom means red. Edom is Esau, the twin brother of Jacob. His name was changed to Edom because he sold his birthright for a bowl of red pottage. And Esau himself was red. Therefore, we have Red Sea, red man, red pottage. Read Esau and Jacob in section 3. See a symbol of people, Revelation 17:15. Pharaoh and his host, the chief instigators against reformation. Egypt had developed an intricate ecclesiastical organization. It was proud of its religious institutions. It despised this people Israel, who did not worship according to the popular religion, and who now, under the message of reform preached by Moses, were taking their stand yet more fully to represent the truth and the law of Jehovah. Review and Herald, January 23, 1930. Now, the Shepherd says that the Red Sea represents the prophecy on Isaiah 63. Now, I would like to read here in answerer number 4 concerning Isaiah 63. On pages 22 and page 23, it says, the first part of the verse, that is Isaiah 63 verse 3. Remember, in 1SR page 99, Red Sea represents the prophecy on Isaiah 63. Now, let's read here on answerer number 4, page 22 on page 23. The first part of the verse applies to the first advent of Christ, and the last part to the time of the purification of the church. It says, to the time of the purification of the church. Then it says, that whoever continues to hold his people in bondage and in ignorance of his truth, will he tread in his anger and trample them in his fury, and sprinkle their blood upon his garments, thereby staining all his raiment, and thus setting his people free. That is pointing to the purification of the church. That if anybody who will continue to hold his people in bondage up to the time when the purification of the church will take place, the voice of inspiration says, God will tread them in his anger and trample them in his fury, and sprinkle their blood upon his garments, thereby staining all his raiment, and thus setting his people free. And I do fully believe that that is pointing to the 144,000 living saints. Now, it's really a tremendous event, brothers and sisters. That is why the shepherd says, we need to prepare for that event. We need to prepare for that event, brothers and sisters. I remember the statement in 1SR. It says that on that event, almost the entire nation of Egypt had been ruined. Let me see. That statement in 1SR. And the antitypical fulfillment is even more terrible. It says here in 1SR, on page 65, it says, not only his chosen suffered of bondage and cruelty, but the Egyptians as well. At the time of the Exodus movement, at the departure of Israel, the plagues came upon all Egypt, and the nation was nearly ruined. You see, the nation was nearly ruined. And that event, brothers and sisters, is typological. And that is the reason why God admonishes his people to prepare for that tremendous event. Now, here in 2TG, let me read to you number 41. Let's go back to our reading. And the reason that we go to Daniel 11, because that event is closely connected. There are two Palestine that we are studying. The modern Palestine and the literal Palestine. So, here on 2TG 41, page 3, I would like to read again. I have been asked to give a study on current events, on the Palestine situation, and on the separation caused by the slaughter that is forecast in Ezekiel's vision. I wish that I could tell you all you want to know, but I cannot say how soon the separation, the purification of the church will take place. God alone knows the time. So B.T. Hodeb has no knowledge when would be the purification of God's church. And he plainly told us that God alone knows the time. But God revealed his secret unto his servants, the prophets. Amos 3 verse 7. And it says, all I know is that it cannot take place before we prepare the way, before our God-given work in connection with Ezekiel 9 is done. Then it will come to pass that the Lord will suddenly come to his temple, the church, and purify the sons of Levi, the ministry. Malachi 3 verse 1 to 3. But those who receive not the mark will fall under the slaughter weapons of the angels, as did the unfaithful firstborn in the night of the Passover in the land of Egypt. We studied several times, brothers and sisters, that there are two slaughtering concerning Ezekiel 9. The slaughtering before the close of provision and the slaughtering after the close of provision. That is very plain, right? On symbolic code, 3 symbolic code, number 1, page 8. Therefore, as there are two separations, there is a double fulfillment of Ezekiel's slaughter. One in the church before the close of provision, and the other in the worldly churches after the close of provision. But we focus our attention to the slaughtering before the close of provision. And that slaughtering, only the firstborn sons are in danger. Whereas the slaughtering after the close of provision, it is called the general destruction of all the wicked Sabbath keepers. Whether you are firstborn or not, if you fail to receive the seal of the living God in your foreheads, then you will be among those people that will perish. But the very first slaughtering, it says here in 1SR Packet Edition, page 55 and page 56, it says, when will this come to pass? When will this come to pass? The type unquestionably reveals the time through the fact that only the firstborn were then in danger. Only the firstborn sons. Who are they, the firstborn? Those who are in the ministry. And as far as the shepherd's rod is thus concerned, the only reason that God will slay those who are in the ministry, because instead of leading God's people to the present truth, they are the very ones who hinder God's people. It says here in 1 TG, number 45, page 20, it says that shepherds are slain, pointing to the firstborn sons, represented by the shepherds. 1 TG, number 45, page 20, that shepherds are slain because they have kept the sheep away from the Lord Green's pasture, present truth. Why is it that the shepherds are slain? It's so because they have kept the sheep away from the Lord Green pasture, present truth. And it's really disheartening to hear from some shepherd rod believers that they were so proud to say that they have the present truth because they have the shepherd's rod publications. Brothers and sisters, to evade the reality, we are not helping our own selves. And we cannot ignore the reality forever. The present truth under the seventh seal never been bestowed by God to Bethlehem, because that present truth is intended only to the saints that will no longer to taste death. And this is the last reading that I would like to read, and we will continue tomorrow. It says, 1 Symbolic Code, number 9, page 9. 1 Symbolic Code, number 9, page 9. It says, moreover, as the shepherd's rod is the Elijah message, TM, page 475, it is impossible for anyone who accepts it and leaves it to die. For the type demands translation. Thus it is that Elijah stands as a type of the 144,000, Desire of Ages 421. Now, if the Elijah message is proclaimed and taught by Bethlehem, the question is, did Bethlehem accept it? If Bethlehem accept it, the shepherd says it is impossible for anyone who accepts it and leaves it to die. Now, the question is that, is it impossible for Bethlehem to die? He died. Now, how could you explain this statement? That those who accept the Elijah message, it is impossible for them to die. Because the type demands translation. But I would like to explain that statement by saying that if the message of Elijah, which is the present truth under the seventh seal, for sure that Elijah must be antitypical Elijah that is by. That the present truth under the seventh seal, no, it is not the present truth that if you will accept it, it is a promise of resurrection. But rather, it is a promise of translation. Can you imagine? I would like to use the term, majority of the Davidian from 1930 to 1955 were already dead. I think among the associates of Bethlehem today, there might be still living, but I think it will not reach 10. It must be less than 10. Or probably exactly only 3 to typify, or at least 4, rather 4, to typify the historical event. But the statement says, so the statement, moreover, as the shepherd's rod is the Elijah message, plainly indicating that the shepherd's rod is the last inspired publications, that if there is a prophet to come, antitypical Elijah that is by, for sure his message is found in the shepherd's rod. No other book, because the shepherd's rod made it so plain that, brothers and sisters, page 8 in General Conference Special, nevertheless, General Conference Special, page 8, nevertheless, one's only safety will be in the teaching of Elijah. For there will be no other voice of timely truth and authority to whom one may turn. Any others will lead their victims blindfolded into perdition. Can you imagine this statement? It is very strong. Where we could find safety, only in the teaching of Elijah. There will be no other voice of timely truth and authority to whom one may turn. Beside Elijah, any others will lead their victims blindfolded into perdition. So, brothers and sisters, 1 Symbolic Code number 9, page 9, plainly indicates that there must be present truth under the seventh seal. That is the message of antitypical Elijah, the Tishbite, by which one of the prominent sign that present truth had been bestowed by God. It says here on 2SR 164, let's read, but when our high priest shall begin the atonement for the living, there must be a message of present truth The atonement for the living did not begin in the days of Betihotep. He died in the period of the judgment that pertains to the dead. But the shepherds had made it so plain that when the judgment for the living begins, there must be a message of present truth. That present truth will be bestowed by God in the period when the judgment for the living is in progress. That's why in 11 Symbolic Code number 3, page 5, it says, present truth comes only from God. Who is the high priest? Jesus Christ. But when our high priest shall begin the atonement for the living, there must be a message of present truth, sounding of the trumpet, urging everyone to lay hold on the Lamb of God, which is Jesus Christ, by which only can he in figure come to the sanctuary, confess his sin and secure his life. Unless the close of the judgment for the dead and the commencement for the living be made known to us, we would have no present truth. While the judgment for the living is in session, neither would such judgment be legal or just. He who fails to respond to the heavenly summons will be left without the seal or covering of God, and therefore must be cut off from among his people as prefigured by the services in the typical Day of Atonement. The most important question that we need to completely settle is that Betihotep has knowledge when the judgment for the dead will close and the judgment for the living begins. Because the statement, unless the knowledge when the judgment for the dead will close and the commencement for the living be made known to us, we would have no present truth. So that present truth is not the present truth in the days of Betihotep, because they have the present truth, but they have no knowledge when the judgment for the dead will close and the judgment for the living begins. He himself testified. It says here in answerer number 1 on page 94, it says, in the statement in question, the rod has no reference to the investigative judgment. The message sets no date, either exact or approximate, for the closing of the judgment for the dead or for the beginning of the judgment of the living. Answerer number 1, page 94, Betihotep says, we have no knowledge, either exact or approximate, when the judgment for the dead will close or the beginning of the judgment of the living. Because that knowledge will be bestowed by God when our high priest will begin the atonement for the living, according to 2SR 164. And that is during the sealing of the 144,000. Because the sealing of the 144,000 is at the closing of the judgment of the dead and the beginning of the judgment of the living. 2SR 171. And the mere fact that God bestowed unto us the knowledge when the judgment that pertains to the dead close and the commencement for the living, plainly indicating that we are now in the sealing of the 144,000, which is soon, very soon, will be finished. And those who fail to respond to the heavenly summons will be left without the seal of the living God. We'll continue this subject tomorrow. May the good Lord bless you and have a beautiful, wonderful evening.